So I thought I would do another video on the no input mixer, Igor Vasiliev's latest app. This is not going to be a tutorial strictly speaking, this is just kind of a follow along while I do some tinkering, try and get some interesting sound. It's very easy to get a lot of chaos out of this app. I think there's a bit of a principle, the less is more principle, which is kind of what we're going to look at here. We're set up in AUM and less is more. I'm only going to use one, possibly two channels. If we just look at the setup, so I've got channel 1 is what we're using and it's set up with a simple feedback loop. We've got the input source is set to insert, post, and the effect on that channel is a flanger. So I've got the alternative interface switched on, which allows you to see the effect for this channel in this first column and then the effect for the output. We've got a bit crush effect on the output, which we leave at 0 presence for now. This send and return, we're not using the send and return effect loops for now. So we're just going to see what we can get out of this single channel, simple feedback loop. Let's just have a quick play and see how it sounds. I'm going to bring the level up slowly. So we've got something going on already. Now you notice it's quite dynamic, there's some movement there, and that's because that movement is introduced by the fact that we have a flanging effect with a fairly low, well, the minimum possible rate there. If I just put that on, if I change that effect temporarily to something else, let's say chorus, then that gives us a different kind of movement, but it does make the sound dynamic. If I temporarily bypass that effect completely, you see we've got feedback of a sort, but it's fairly static. Wherever I put the level slider, not much happens. If I choose, let's say, the bit crush, again that's clearly affecting the output, but it's kind of static. So it's kind of useful to use, I mean, combinations of effects work well, but some combination that includes a flanger I found gives you the most clearly, moving dynamic kind of sound. Effect 8 is the output slot effect, and we've got the bit crush on that. If I just let you hear what that sounds like. And we can tweak the settings. Now something about that effect which is going to be interesting in a little while is that it, depending on where you set those parameter sliders, it introduces overtones, very specific. I don't know if they're octaves or something, but it sounds like it's wobbling up and down between octaves or something like that. So a different kind of dynamism, if you like. Let's assume you have more than one of these channels active. The level slider doesn't do what you might imagine it's going to do. You might expect that it's just going to balance the channels against each other, but actually the level slider, because we've got feedback loops going on, qualitatively affects the kind of the nature of the feedback. So it's not just the level control, except in the simplest of settings. If you turn off all the effects, I think it more or less does behave like a level, simple level. It does there almost, but then it breaks down at some point when you go past a certain level. So that's important because if you're going to use multiple channels, it is actually quite difficult to balance the volume of each channel against each other. What you can do is you can run multiple instances of the no input mixer in AUM or another host and balance the levels using the AUM channel level sliders. But of course, to do that, you've got to sacrifice some of the potential for inter-channel interference. So it's, there's so much experimentation you can do with this. So we're going to use the level slider. I'm going to put my flanger back on. We're going to use this frequency slider quite a lot. That's very important. In some sense, it's the balance between these two sliders alone can produce some very interesting things. If I just have a go at that. Now, of course, I'm dragging that slider really quickly there, but if you drag it really slowly and then pause and adjust other things, you find little kind of backwaters and crevices, and where, you know, if you just whiz past them, you miss subtlety. So. So that's the general kind of basic sound we're going to get out of this patch. I mentioned briefly the high and low pass cutoff sliders. If I just manipulate those, I've got, as I said, I've got those mapped to hardware. Now, not only can I use those sliders to vary somewhat the tone that we're hearing, but I can, you know, essentially use it to suppress the output. You know, it's almost like playing it as an instrument because I've got these on hardware. The patch is what it is. It's still kind of dull in some ways. So what I found it's very useful to do is to go outside the app and just pipe this through something else. If we look at what I've got set up in AUM, this looks complicated, but it's actually not. I've got 3 alternatives set up here. These 2 things up here, they take the output from the input mixer and just dump it on these 2 buses. So if we listen to the rightmost bus, we're hearing the no input mixer itself. I've got 2 other alternatives set up here. One is I've got a chain of 2 effects, which is basically a delay effect, and then well, that's another delay. It's sort of much more complicated delay. Other desert cities, and that's set to have some kind of granular delay. And then the third possibility is I've got a lane. It's basically got another Igor app, which is the Fieldscaper app, in loop mode, so it's acting as a filter. Let's listen to this one first. If I just swap that for the raw output. If I choose a different preset, so if I leave that running and we go back into the no input mixer, if I just tweak, let's look at the other option, which is going through the, oh, we hear the raw sound again. Just reel it in a bit. We'll just put it through the delay effect first. You see, by the way, that I've got the reverb turned all the way down inside the, because I'm going through external effects, I've left the reverb off, because if you have too many things like reverb and delay indeed chained together, it just starts to get very muddy and messy. So we leave that to the end of the chain outside of the app. And of course you can hear that delay if you start fiddling with. Again, if I set that up there and close the filters, we're back to that basically empty sound with a little bit of noise there. We can just open the filters momentarily. It's a good effect. Let's get something simple. So I'll bring in this other effect. Now that massively expands that soundscape into something really quite exotic. And remember, we've already got one channel here with very little feedback going on, but some. And I'm just tweaking the filters now. And that's verging on the kind of melodic. Of course, we can't really control the melody. I think that filter, that Other Desert Cities filter, yeah, that's got a tone variation as part of that, with randomness built in. So that's another thing that makes it more interesting. Let this bit crush effect back in as well. We'll tweak that and just. Another thing I've done is, which I did in my previous video, if you saw that, I've got some LFOs going here. You can use whatever you have. This is MIDI LFOs. You can use the Brambos apps as well. That's got some LFO tools in there, I think, and probably like 50 other apps. So I've got 2 LFOs set up here that are randomising the position of, let's first of all try that one. This is the frequency slider. So if I just open that up, let it run. So hands off. You'll see that every now and again that frequency slider jumps to a different position. Because I can still tweak the other slider. You probably hear there that that bit crush effect is quite obtrusive, or quite noticeable rather, because it's constant. Again, that's something we can tweak manually, but I've got that on my second LFO just so that can, because we don't want that there all the time. It becomes quite obvious if we leave it there all the time. I think it's this one that's, and again they're both on sample and hold patterns with a very low, slow rate. So we should see that slider moving up and down of its own accord. Just something else I'll mention while I remember actually. If I turn those LFOs off for a minute, I mentioned that we're essentially using one channel to do all of this. What I found quite interesting to do is to set up more or less the same feedback loop setup, if you like, on 2 different channels. So I've set up channel 2 to be similar. If we bring up channel 2, you hear it's kind of similar. Well, the reason this is interesting is you can have something going with a very kind of low-key background drone, if you like, and then you can, while that's running, go to the other channel and you can do these, kind of punctuations by just quickly tweaking the slider. So we get that, we don't have this overpowering, overwhelming cacophony of noise. We got something quite sparse. It's not particularly melodic at the minute. I think we'll just stay with the one channel for now. Put my LFOs back on. Because I've got these on different AUM channels, I can mix in the unadulterated output from the no input mixer. As I say, that's the unfiltered output. This is the fully filtered output, and I can mix them together. I'm controlling the overall kind of gating really with the high and low pass filters. It's still producing output. You can see the sliders, indicators going up and down, but they're suppressed with the filtering. I'll just load this preset again. In fact, let's load a different one. This is the one I started with. Of course, the other thing we can do is we can change what filters we've got applied. If we go in, try some of the presets in here. And the danger is here, we're just throwing too much in and it's becoming muddy. Mix that in with the original. So there it is. I think we'll leave it there for now. You get the idea. Hours of fun for all the family.